What happens when a bank teller insults an elderly black man in a wheelchair, only to find out he owns the place? This isn't just a story about discrimination. It's a real-life wake-up call about respect, character, and how we treat those we think have no power. Stick around, because in just a few minutes, one man will expose a culture, shift an entire workplace, and remind us that real leadership doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it rolls in quietly and changes everything. If you're someone who values integrity, truth, and stories that reveal who we really are, this one's for you. It was a Tuesday morning, but not just any Tuesday. The kind that begins too quietly. The kind where even the sunlight feels like it's holding back. At exactly 8:58 a.m., the tall glass doors of Heritage Trust Bank in downtown Charleston whispered, "Open." The marble floors gleamed. The scent of fresh espresso from the break room lingered like a promise. And through those glass doors rolled a man most would overlook without a second thought. Harold Thompson, 68 years old, skin dark like polished walnut, a blazer worn with dignity, a navy blue fedora that had seen its share of Carolina summers, and a wheelchair that moved without sound. He didn't move fast, didn't need to. He had the kind of presence that made the world slow down. But this morning the world didn't notice, not yet. He wheeled himself slowly across the polished lobby, his eyes sweeping the room like a quiet surveyor. Two tellers chatted behind the counter. A security guard, young and half awake, barely looked up. A handful of early customers sat scrolling on their phones, more absorbed in memes than money. Nobody looked twice, and that was exactly how Harold wanted it. He came without announcement, without entourage, without expectation. Just a man with a folder in his lap and time on his hands. He stopped near the reception desk, where a polished wooden sign read, "Welcome to Heritage Trust, proudly serving Charleston since 1932. The young woman behind the desk was adjusting her name tag. "Excuse me," Harold said, his voice soft but clear. "Could I speak with the branch manager, please?" She looked up, startled. Her smile was automatic, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No, ma'am. But if someone's available, I'd greatly appreciate a moment." She hesitated, then gestured toward the clipboard. "You can sign in here. Someone will be with you shortly." Harold gave a small nod, but he didn't pick up the pen. Not yet. He turned slightly and looked over the lobby again. No one was watching. No one cared. And that was telling. A young man in business casual bumped into a display stand without apologizing. Elderly woman shuffled past with her checkbook clutched to her chest. Normal. Ordinary. Until it wasn't. Because this wasn't just a man in a wheelchair. This was Harold Thompson. And Harold didn't come to this bank by accident. He chose this branch, chose this moment. And the people inside were about to learn something. Not because he wanted to teach them, but because they were about to teach themselves. The hard way the clock on the wall ticked to 9 a.m., 3 minutes since Harold entered. 3 minutes before everything changed. "Unreal," Lisa Monroe muttered under her breath. The words slipped out, quiet but sharp, as she glanced at Harold from behind the teller counter. Lisa was in her early 30s. Too much eyeliner. A platinum blonde ponytail pulled so tight it gave her perpetual scowl. She leaned toward her coworker, not even trying to hide her smirk. "Bet he's just here to cash someone else's check." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of comment meant to wound in silence. Harold heard it. Of course he did. But his face didn't change. Not one line. He simply adjusted. The folder in his lap and waited. "Sir," Lisa said now, louder. "You can't just wait in reception. If you're not here for a transaction, you'll need to move aside." "I was hoping to speak with the branch manager," Harold replied. Calm as ever. Lisa rolled her eyes. "Like I said, unless it's a scheduled meeting, that's not possible right now." Harold turned slightly toward the security guard. "Would you mind passing this document to whoever's in charge today?" The guard, Malik, his name tag read, shifted awkwardly. Before he could respond, Lisa stepped in. "We don't accept random Paperwork, sir. If this is a complaint, we have an online form. It's not a complaint, Harold said gently. It's information. She reached across the counter and pushed the paper back toward him with a pink fingernail. Then email it. Or better, yet come back with an appointment. Malik moved closer now. He didn't speak, but he was watching. And so was a customer by the coffee station. And an older black man near the brochures, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Lisa hadn't noticed the shift. Not yet. But the room had changed. Harold slid the paper back onto the counter. Didn't push, didn't raise his voice. Please, he said again. Just hand it to the manager. Lisa looked at the document, then at Harold, then back again. She sighed. Fine, but don't expect a miracle. She grabbed the paper and turned her back, walked off with her heels clicking like punctuation. The eyes in the room followed her, and slowly turned back to the man in the chair. The man who still hadn't raised his voice. But somehow, everyone had started listening. The paper didn't land on a pile. It didn't get ignored. Lisa had barely taken 5 steps toward the hallway when Marcus, an assistant manager in his 40s, walked past. He noticed the paper, the tension, and the man in the chair. Everything. All right here? He asked. Lisa forced a smile. Just a walk-in being difficult. No appointment, wants to speak to upper management. Marcus held out his hand. Let me see it. Lisa hesitated, but handed it over. Marcus unfolded the paper, eyes scanning the letterhead, then the first line, then the signature. His brow furrowed, then rose, then froze. He turned slowly, as if his entire body had suddenly become aware of what the room already knew. He looked directly at Harold. Mr. Thompson? Harold gave a nod. Just one. Marcus stepped back from the counter, cleared his throat, then addressed Lisa without raising his voice. Get Mr. Jennings from his office, now. Lisa blinked. You mean? Now. She backed away, the heels not so loud this time. The lobby had fallen completely silent. Marcus turned to Harold. I apologize, sir. I had no idea you were visiting today. That was the point, Harold replied, and the words hung there. In a room where power had quietly shifted. No announcements, no confrontations, just one man, one document. And now everyone was listening. Lisa returned from the hallway slower than she left. Her confident stride had softened into a cautious shuffle. She clutched a walkie-talkie she rarely used and avoided looking anyone in the eye. Behind her, the office door opened. Out stepped Arthur, Jennings mid-50s, silver-streaked hair, navy suit, no tie. His presence was quiet, but it commanded attention. He looked like someone who'd handled a few storms. But today, he was walking straight into one he hadn't seen coming. Marcus handed him the document without saying a word. Arthur's eyes scanned the page, then flicked up to Harold, and his expression changed. Not panic, but something close. He walked across the lobby, weaving past stunned employees and silent clients. When he reached Harold, he extended a hand. Mr. Thompson, I had no idea you'd be here today. Harold shook it firm, unshaken. I prefer it that way. Arthur nodded, voice lower now. Would you like to come into my office? Not just yet, Harold said. He looked around the lobby. Every pair of eyes was now on him. Something happened out here. Arthur followed his gaze. Customers, tellers, staff pretending to be busy, but nobody was really working. They were all waiting to see what came next. Lisa stood frozen by the counter, hands clasped tightly. We have full camera coverage, don't we? Harold asked. Arthur nodded. 8 cameras, audio included. Harold smiled slightly. Good. I'd like to review this morning's footage before we talk. Arthur nodded again, then turned to Lisa. Step into my office, now. She opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway. Harold didn't follow yet. He looked at Marcus. Thank you for stepping in. Marcus gave a slow nod. It's what anyone should have done. Harold didn't correct him. Didn't say that, not everyone does. Didn't need to. Back in the hallway, Arthur opened his office door and held it for Harold. "Let's take a look." The footage didn't lie. The audio was clear. The disrespect was captured in crystal clarity. Harold didn't flinch as he watched it replay. Arthur, on the other hand, sat very still. Then, slowly, closed the laptop. "I'll handle this, Mr. Thompson." Harold nodded. "I'm not here to fire anyone." Arthur looked surprised. "No. I'm here to see who deserves to be part of what we're building." Arthur leaned back. "Understood." Harold stood slowly, turned toward the door. "Let me know when you're ready." Arthur exhaled. It was going to be one of those days, but perhaps a necessary one. Lisa sat in Arthur's office, shoulders tense, fingers locked together. She didn't speak. Not at first. Arthur remained standing. He paced slowly behind his desk, glancing at the still image on his laptop screen. Lisa's face frozen mid-sneer. You know how many complaints we've received in the past about tone?" He didn't ask it like a question. Lisa looked down. "I didn't mean..." "That's always the excuse," Arthur said. "You didn't mean..." He turned to face her fully. "But you meant every word. You just didn't mean to get caught." Lisa blinked. Her face flushed. She tried again. "If I had known who he was, would you have treated him differently?" Arthur's voice was soft now, but it cut deep. She opened her mouth, closed it. He walked to his desk drawer, pulled out a standard issue envelope. "I've drafted your formal release paperwork. Arthur, I'll give you 5 minutes to collect your things." Lisa stood, but didn't leave right away. "He humiliated me." Arthur didn't look up. "No, you humiliated yourself." She left without another word. Back in the lobby, the air had changed. Harold sat calmly by the entrance, a quiet observer. Marcus spoke with the security guard, double-checking timestamps on the footage. Customers whispered, employees lingered, then Lisa reappeared. Her name tag was gone. Her purse was clutched tightly to her chest. She walked straight through the lobby, past Harold, past the other staff. No one stopped her. No one spoke. Just silence. She reached the door and exited without looking back. Arthur stepped out a minute later, held a folder in his hand. Approached Harold slowly. "It's done." Harold gave a small nod. Arthur handed him the folder. A full report of this morning, including a copy of the footage. "Thank you. Would you like to speak to the team?" Harold paused, then nodded again. Arthur turned and motioned to Marcus. "Gather the staff." Minutes later, the floor cleared. Tellers stepped out from behind their counters. Loan officers paused mid-task. Even the janitor leaned quietly against his mop near the back wall. Harold didn't rise. He didn't need to. He positioned his chair at the center of the room, looked slowly from face to face. "I didn't come here to test your skills." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I came to see how people treat those they think have nothing to offer." No one moved. No one blinked. And what I saw today, he paused, told me everything I needed to know. He turned his gaze toward Marcus. "Some of you stepped forward. Some stayed quiet. That's human." He looked at the security guard. "But the difference between decency and complicity is attention. You saw, and you chose to watch." Malik, the guard, looked down. Harold didn't scold. He simply continued. "This isn't just a lesson for today. It's a mirror. What happens when we see someone not as a client, but as a problem?" He glanced at the door. "She's gone. But what she said, how she acted, that remains." He leaned back. "It's up to you to be better." He didn't preach, didn't grandstand, just truth, simple and undeniable. Then he nodded to Arthur. "I think that's all I needed to say." Arthur looked around the staff, then to Harold. "We'll remember." Harold didn't reply. He didn't need to, because the lesson had already taken root. The staff stood quietly, not out of fear, but something deeper: respect, reflection. Harold wheeled himself back slowly, not leaving the circle but creating room for the weight of silence. Then from the back of the room, someone stepped forward. Was Carla Nguyen, mid-20s, new to the loan department. She'd spent most of the morning frozen, afraid to say the wrong thing, afraid to be noticed. But now, her voice didn't shake. "I didn't speak up," she said. "And I should have." Harold turned slightly in his chair, gave her his full attention. "What you do next matters more than what you didn't do." Carla exhaled. Her shoulders dropped. Then another voice joined in. Terrell Johnson, a teller who'd worked at Heritage for 7 years. "People joke around here all the time," he said. But that wasn't a joke, and we all knew it. He looked toward the door Lisa had exited. "We just didn't want to deal with it." Harold nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here. To remind you that not wanting to deal with something doesn't make it go away." He turned toward Arthur. "You lead a team. You shape this culture." Arthur stood straighter. "And I take responsibility." Harold's gaze softened. "Then start by listening. Not just today. Every day." He looked around again. "Respect isn't something you give based on status. It's something you extend because every human deserves it." He let the silence rest a moment. "When someone walks into this bank, they bring their whole story with them. You don't know what they've survived, what they're carrying, but you can choose not to add weight to it." The janitor, Mr. Rowland, a Vietnam vet who spoke only when necessary, cleared his throat. "You handled it better than I ever could have." Harold smiled. "There's more than one way to lead. Sometimes the quietest way is the most powerful." Few heads nodded. Even Marcus, who'd stayed near the back, looked changed. "I always thought leadership was about giving orders," he said. "But you gave space, and people filled it with truth." Harold chuckled. "Funny what happens when you stop talking and start watching." Arthur stepped forward. "Would you consider coming back? Maybe to speak with our new hires?" Harold tilted his head. "I'm not a speaker. Just a man in a chair who's lived long enough to see things clearly. But I'll think about it." The mood shifted. Lighter now. Hopeful. Arthur turned to the group. "We've got work to do." He looked to Harold. "But I promise you, this place will never be the same again." Harold gave a small nod. "That's all I ever wanted." He turned toward the glass doors. The morning sun was brighter now, and as he wheeled forward, someone, Carla, stepped ahead to hold the door, not out of obligation, but out of something far more powerful: understanding. The door closed gently behind him, but the impact of his visit lingered. Inside, no one moved right away. Not because they were frozen, but because they were thinking, processing, feeling. Terrell stood quietly at his counter. His hands rested on the edge, not working, just resting. He looked at the space Harold had just left. That man walked in here invisible, and walked out unforgettable. Marcus leaned against the far wall. He stared at the front doors like they might open again. "I've been here 12 years, he said. "Never seen a morning like this." Arthur returned to his office briefly. He set the folder Harold had handed him into a locked drawer, not because he needed to hide it, but because some things deserve reverence, a record, a reminder. He sat down, opened his laptop, and began drafting an email to corporate, to HR, to every branch manager in the state. "We had a moment today," he wrote, "a wake-up call, and we heard it." Meanwhile, Carla sat at her desk. She was supposed to be finalizing a home loan application. Instead, she pulled out a sticky note and scribbled one word: "Listen." She stuck it on the edge of her monitor, a quiet vow. At the coffee station, Mr. Rowland wiped down the counter with slow, steady movements. He didn't hum, didn't speak, but his face wore a softness it hadn't earlier, the kind that says, "Today, something shifted." A teenage customer came back in with his mother just before noon. He handed Terrell $5 in cash. "I want to open a savings account," he said. Terrell blinked, then smiled. "Best decision you'll make today." The boy nodded. "That guy who left. He was cool, didn't yell, didn't threaten, just was." Terrell nodded, and that's what made everyone listen. By afternoon, the pace returned. Phones rang, deposits were made. Paperwork was filed. But something was different. Clients were greeted with eye contact. Questions were asked with care. Even Malik, the guard, stood a little taller, more aware, more present. Arthur walked the lobby just before closing. No clipboard, no urgency. Just watching, seeing, judging less, noticing more. He stopped by Carla's desk, noticed the sticky note, smiled. He didn't say anything, just nodded and kept walking. That evening, as the lights dimmed and the staff clocked out, there wasn't chatter, but there was energy. Quiet, grounded, earned. Harold Thompson didn't come to expose anyone. He came to observe. But in doing so, he opened something far more powerful than a file folder. He opened eyes. He stirred hearts. He reminded a room full of people that decency doesn't demand a title. It doesn't wear a suit, and it doesn't shout. It simply shows up, listens, and lets the truth be seen. If this story made you pause, if it made you feel, then remember this. Power isn't loud, and leadership doesn't always stand. Sometimes it rolls in quietly and leaves a legacy behind. Maybe today you were reminded to listen before judging. Maybe you saw someone you know in Lisa. Maybe you saw yourself. The truth is, we all have the power to shift a room, to stop a pattern, to speak up when it matters, or to stay silent and let someone else carry the weight. But if Harold Thompson taught us anything, it's that dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't need to, because the loudest lessons are the ones whispered through action. If this story moved you, share it. Let it be the reason someone chooses empathy over ego. Tomorrow, and remember what we do when no one's watching. That's who we really are. Subscribe for more true life stories that make you think, feel, and maybe choose better next time.